The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Harry T. Stone presiding. Tired. This is On Trial, a presentation of the Radulich and Broadcasting Premier Podcast. This is the podcast where we place old movies on trial and debate them Lincoln Douglas style. Of course, I am joined by my usual host on this show, though lately we've had like a round robin of different people on this particular format. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Sean, you're not. How do you do, sir?
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dr. Sean.
And ladies and gentlemen, he is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I'm going to need you to start, like, when I do this with you, take a pair of glasses off and hand them to one of your children or your wife. I'll go either way.
There aren't any in the room right now, so otherwise I would.
Roam across the room. Ladies and gentlemen.
Now don't I feel stupid for wearing the Bret Hart t-shirt underneath my hoodie?
Roadhouse. Ladies and gentlemen, from our Canadian office, from out in the wilderness, he's riding up on his tauntaun. How many tortured references could I make in this one intro? Andrew Graham, how do you do, sir?
I do fine, Mark. And Toast House. So there's one more tortured reference for you.
All right. So tonight, it's a special civil court edition of On Trial. Yeah, for those of you just tuning in going, what is he rambling about? Like I said, On Trial is the format we do to use old movies, and we debate them. One of us prosecutes, one of us defends, and then we kibitz for a bit. It's a little bit different of a format tonight because we're taking two movies and comparing and contrasting them and debating the merits of each one, but we actually have to talk about them first. And on the docket tonight is Roadhouse. Family Guy.
Roadhouse.
Roadhouse. It's gonna be the whole podcast. So the first one, the original, Roadhouse, is a 1989 American action film directed by Rowdy Herrington. I don't believe that's a real name. It stars Patrick Swayze, Ben Gazzara, Kelly Lynch, and Sam Elliott. And then we will be comparing it to Roadhouse 2024, directed by Doug Liman, who is a sourpuss over not getting a theatrical exhibition. And sir, let me just say once again, be happy this didn't go to theaters and bomb, because it would have, sir. It's just fine on Amazon Prime. And that rhymes. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Daniela Melchior, Conor McGregor's head on Brock Lesnar's body, J.D. Pardo, Arturo Castro, and Billy Magnussen. Joel Silver produces the film as he did the original. And yes, this is available on Amazon Prime. So we were talking before the show tonight, and when I hear from you guys, I'll kind of get into my own thing here. But first, Andrew, because this is one of those situations where we can't get Andrew on a podcast because he's usually out in the woods hunting bears or cleaning up a house full of toxic ooze, as near as I can tell.
Yeah, that's what was happening tonight. So there you go.
But the women and children are locked in his Canadian basement so that he can do this, and he insisted on being here. Why are you here, Andrew? Why Roadhouse?
Why Roadhouse? Honest to God, because I had never actually watched the original. I've heard about it. I've heard about it from friends. I've been accused of having something wrong with me for never having watched the original Roadhouse. So I wanted to watch that, and then
Does it like stop in the middle of you're like rolling jujitsu and you just kind of like whisper? So I've never seen Roadhouse. And the guy just like lets you go. Like, what the hell, man? Is that how that works?
I think I have been judged by people at the studio for that. So, but I mean, like the new one was coming out. It's kind of a fun opportunity to do kind of a contrast and compare. And I'll be kind of perfectly honest, and we'll probably get into this a bit more. But it's like I don't have a whole lot of connection and a whole lot of affection to kind of late 80s, early 90s action movies. So like, want to take a little bit of time to kind of refamiliarize with myself with, one of the all-time classics.
That's fair. Sean, we were doing this because On Trial was kind of our thing, even though I have been sharing it with others because, to share is to care. But did you actually have any affection for the original Roadhouse movie? Had you seen it before? Was there any particular interest in doing this other than I said it's on the schedule, so we must? Sean froze again. So Sean will figure his technology out eventually. I'm kind of with you, Andrew. I did not see the original Roadhouse in 1989, and I'll tell you why. As they said at the beginning of Jesus Built My Hot Rod, I don't buy Patrick Swayze, and this is something we can talk about for just a moment. And then, Andrew, let me talk to you for a minute. Can I talk to you?
You can absolutely talk to me.
I don't buy Patrick Swayze as an action hero. That man, when he was in Dirty Dancing and he was cutting a rug and throwing Jennifer What's-Her-Nuts up in the air and all of that and telling nobody puts his baby in the corner, I buy Patrick Swayze as a tough guy among old middle-aged people. Sure, I get that. I buy Patrick Swayze being in love with Demi Moore and getting killed in a mugging and coming back to haunt her. And talking, and doing high comedy with Whoopi Goldberg. I'm good with all of that. What I don't buy him as an ass-kicking action hero throwing guys out of bars. Now, that's not to say he doesn't pull off the role. Sean might be throwing in the towel tonight.
Okay.
It's fine. It's not to say that he doesn't pull off the role, which we'll talk about momentarily. But when I was I guess 12 or 13 years old, when the original came out, like I said, I had seen Dirty Dancing. I think I'd seen maybe one or two other things with Patrick Swayze. And boy, were we trying to make him a thing at that time. And I didn't buy it, just like I don't buy Tom Cruise as Jack Reacher. He is 3 feet tall. He can fly a jet just fine. He can look awesome, and he can hang off jets to the Mission Impossible music, but I don't buy him as a 6 foot tall ass kicking machine. Same thing with Patrick Swayze. So I had no interest in Roadhouse as a kid. I'm like, look, Schwarzenegger, Stallone, these are my hot, sweaty men running around fields shooting foreigners. That's fine. Young Mark buys it. Old Mark buys that. Young Mark doesn't buy Patrick Swayze, and I'll let you chime in here. Old Mark does not buy Patrick Swayze as an action hero. So I really struggled with Roadhouse and as a boy who watched Cocktail as a kid, I still couldn't watch this movie. Cocktail with Tom Cruise, that is.
Okay, and we're never into references. Because I've never actually seen Cocktail.
Oh my God, are you missing out on one of the awesome, dumbest movies you've ever seen? Tom Cruise is throwing bottles hither and yon to the sounds of the Beach Boys. We'll talk about it someday on here.
Okay, no worries. Well, I mean, that's kind of an interesting starting point. I mean, I don't have a ton of reference for Patrick Swayze. I think really hard back in kind of the movies I've watched. I think probably the first movie is honest to God, the first movie I think I probably saw him in was To Wong Fu.
Oh, that's Sean and I are going to talk about that for Pride Month in a month or so.
Yeah,
we're doing all of our Pride Month stuff in May this year because he's getting married in June. But yeah, To Wong Fu's on there.
Yeah, so that one was one of them. I think the other one I also think of a lot is The Outsiders.
Yeah, I've never seen that one.
You've never seen The Outsiders?
I have never seen The Outsiders.
Great movie.
I believe you.
Sorry?
I believe you.
Yeah. We ended up watching that one or reading that one a couple of times in grade school and watching the movie at the same time. And that's actually a really good movie with a really stellar cast when you think about it. But in terms of, kind of my watching of the initial Roadhouse and things, I actually completely bought him in this role. And I mean, especially the fact that they were always pointing out every 30 seconds, I thought you'd be bigger.
Yeah, I was definitely having Mark Hamill vibes in Star Wars.
Yeah.
A little short for a stormtrooper.
And the fact it kind of necessitates the fact that it necessitates his style of how he's a bouncer.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I think one of the things that I love most about that movie is the be nice speech.
Yeah, it's called de-escalation.
Oh,
And
exactly.
I know that the Family Guy joke is the awesomeness, the superpower of Roadhouse and Patrick Swayze is his ability to solve problems by kicking people. And look, it's not that I don't buy into that religious philosophy of you can solve all your problems by kicking them. I get it. I'm with you. However, in situations where you just can't kick people, de-escalation helps, and it is definitely a technique and a skill. One that, because of my profession, one that I've had to master. That is like the whole thing with Roadhouse and Patrick Swayze in the movie is, yes, he's doing a lot of roundhouse kicks, roundhouse and roadhouse, Andrew, roundhouse,
roadhouse,
but that, and we'll talk about it when we actually talk about the movie, like the whole be nice speech. That's what he's passing on to them. It's like, be alert, have body awareness, and learn to de-escalate things before it turns to property destruction. And that's kind of the beauty of those scenes.
And they set it up so well in the first, 10 minutes of the movie where he's dealing with the two guys in the bar. One guy slashes him. He says, "Okay, boys, we're taking it outside." And I think at that point he had like a team of like 6 other bouncers.
Yeah.
If they wanted to, they could have just whooped those guys right there.
Right.
But instead he walks them outside. The objective is complete. They're now outside of the bar. They're not getting back in. And then it's like, good night. That's it.
Yep.
Nothing more.
It's great. We'll talk more extensively about that in a few minutes. Sean, Patrick Swayze is an action star, yay or nay? Because my whole opening bit here was I didn't buy him as an action star as a kid, so I didn't buy him in Roadhouse. So I'd never seen it until this past week.
100% yay, and I'll tell you why.
You'll tell me why.
Shut up. You know what, guys? What a week my last few days have been. My opinions are going to be a bit sharp and piquant tonight. But he has a quality about him that the first thing I thought of when I saw it was one of my favorite Charles Bronson movies. And that's Mr. Majestic. I think it is anyway. I think that's the one where he's the migrant worker.
Yeah.
Who kind of takes up for all the other migrant workers that are getting summarily dicked over. I say that because Bronson virtually never played characters who went looking for trouble. He more often played soft-spoken characters who kind of reserved violence as an absolute last, okay, I guess we're doing this resort. That's what I like about Dalton in the original Roadhouse.
Yeah.
Is he's kind of a warrior monk, really. He's the kind that, he has these very specific skills in his tool belt. But at the same time, as you were pointing out when I came back in, he's very into keeping things even-headed.
Yeah.
To first trying to solve anything without a single punch being thrown. And it's not just in the line delivery, it's not just in the action, it's also in the way that he carries himself throughout nearly the entire movie, except for about the last half of Act 3.
Yeah, there really isn't any choice anymore.
Yeah, when it's really truly on. And he doesn't have quite this tormented, tortured backstory like Jake Gyllenhaal's Dalton does in the Amazon version.
We're going to talk about that because that bears some discussion, especially in the wording you chose. Yeah, go ahead.
I wasn't quite done yet, though. Just real briefly. But I think that kind of works to Swayze's favor as a performer in that it lets him kind of have a little bit of that intrigue. You can't quite see entirely behind the curtain mystique about him. But at the same time, it also serves the story by keeping it fantastically simple and really focusing on the conflict and not bogging everything down with so much backstory that at a certain point you just go, crikey, fuck, I don't care. Someone just throw another roundhouse kick. It's a long way of saying Family Guy and about 25 years of memes lied to me about what this movie
it's a lot. It's deeper. About. It's not nearly as shallow as it's been presented in popular media.
I was surprised how much I liked it right away. Like, I think within about 10 minutes, I'm like, I have a lot of affection for this movie, and I've never seen it before.
So real quick, and then I'm jumping into the plot synopsis. We're going to skip notes tonight unless there's something like crazy about the pre-production of this that you want to bring up. But I just look at because I was looking at the Wikipedia. I can't imagine there was any much to this.
Stuff about cars.
But the one thing I would point out is that, and I don't know, Andrew, you're a little bit more of a student of action movies and the fine art of martial arts, cinematography, and choreography.
Gentlemen, I'd like to use the phrase action cinema.
Cinema!
Cinema!
Cinema! Waiting for my son to do a run now.
I was going to say that I read somewhere that Swayze was actually a trained dancer. And
that makes sense.
Kind of from his physique to his execution of the choreography, you can really see it in that fluidity, but it's kind of a curious mix of having the natural fluidity and rhythm and bodily control of a dancer.
He has the most manly pirouette I've ever seen. He has the most manly pirouette I've seen since Gregory Hines.
Yes, but that's what I was getting at, because he manages to combine that like few others do. About the first two that come to mind as being able to do this would be probably Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bruce Lee. Mm-hmm. He combines it with the ability to convincingly kick somebody's ass on screen and not have you questioning the plausibility for a moment.
And maybe I'll pick up on that one there. So I think that that's some interesting stuff, and it's a good observation on his dance background. So he had his dance background, but he also did have background. If I remember the list, I want to say it was some kung fu, some tai chi. I think a little bit of aikido as well. So he actually had kind of that nice combination.
He's doing tai chi in the movie, isn't he? On the beach or whatever it was.
They're kind of mushing stuff together a little bit. Mm-hmm. But one of the interesting things that I picked up, so there's this great series by the Corridor Crew on YouTube of where they talk to actual stuntmen and actual, I think it's like Action Men React or visual VFX artists react. And they've got a great series where they actually bring on a lot of the stuntmen who have worked on the MCU series. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you guys a little quiz here. Who's the best guy to choreograph a fight scene with in the MCU?
Who?
It's Chris Evans. Would you like to know why?
I believe
why, Andrew?
Tap dancer.
That makes sense.
When it comes to fight
I didn't know he had a tap background.
Sorry?
So I didn't know he had a tap background.
He did, apparently. I didn't even know that until I saw it. But part of the thing that makes action scenes work, and I think we'll talk about that, especially as it comes to the second one, is timing and rhythm.
Sure, absolutely.
Because that's really, especially when you're choreographing, like that cadence and everything is a really key part of what makes a good action scene compelling versus what falls flat versus what's such a staccato that you can't even pick up what's going on.
So really, really quickly, like I'm going to do this in 10 words or less, count them. We all know that I have a little bit of a professional wrestling background. I was trained just slightly when I worked for XPW and Extreme Associates. And I remember like day one in training camp, one of the things they told us is this isn't a fight, this is a dance.
Yep.
Someone leads, someone follows, be light on your feet. Don't be a potato sack. Just, you want to, and the object is to keep moving. This is why when you used to watch like Tough Enough, or you used to watch some of the like documentaries about NXT and whatnot, they would show so much calisthenics in the training because the dynamic impact of having to go low, go high, go low, go high, keep moving is so much different than straight running, which I've done both. Done like marathon running and stuff like that, mud runs, and it's a whole other thing than having wrestling wind, for lack of a better phrase, being able to move around that ring, be light, ring shape, be light, get up for your partner, and, you know, be able to move around that ring without any wasted energy. So when those guys do finally break and they have like a rest hold, it used to annoy me because like the audience would be screaming boo. It's like, sorry, do you know, and none of us could do what they were doing at the rate they were doing it. Give him a break. Let Randy Orton hold the chokehold. It's fine. Yep. Give him a break. Okay.
You're actually reminding me a little bit about an interview that I read earlier. Ronda Rousey has been in the news with a lot of pro wrestling opinions lately.
Sure.
And she's got a book coming out, so stands to reason.
Another one?
Yeah, apparently.
Okay, interesting.
I'm guessing it's about her WWE career.
Yeah. And Becky Lynch piped up with an opinion about Ronda. Not a disrespectful one, but a very honest one, where they pointed out that they thought that since she had her UFC background and her, you know, pure martial arts background before that, that they could just throw her right into the deep end of the pool, and she was going to be doing the backstroke instantly.
Yeah.
And then said, but they based all this off the fact that she had one really well put together match that Stephanie, Kurt Angle, and Triple H executed beautifully, so that it was all kind of just right there for her, and she just kind of had to be in the right place at the right time and know what to do. I feel like there's something to that about fight choreography and the art of action cinema as well, in terms of you have a difference between people who can hit spots, perform acrobatics, they're good with the wire work and everything, but that's about all they really bring to the movie. And there's a difference between someone like that and someone who can bring some character to the action, that emotional content. Someone,
you see what shirt I'm wearing today.
exactly. Someone like a Bruce Lee, a Keanu Reeves, Donnie Yen. I would even dare say it's what separates a Chow Yun Fat from a Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan is a great stuntman and martial artist, but if we're going to compare acting, Chow Yun Fat laps him. Or if we're talking about Western movies, a comparison I've made several times. At this point, John Cena and Batista have already lapped Dwayne Johnson several times over.
I want to add something to what you're saying and then go right into the plot synopsis. Jim Cornette, one of his major problems with like Johnny Gargano, and this again relates back to the film in case anyone's like, why are they talking wrestling? Like, stay with us. I promise we're going to get to the movie in about 10 seconds. But he was like, his biggest problem with Johnny Gargano is that when you're in a fight, and Andrew, you know this, like when you're rolling jujitsu, you may not be able to see it because you're the one doing it, but you're making faces. Stuff hurts.
Oh, yeah.
You're uncomfortable. You know, you're out of breath. Things are happening, and it's showing on your face. And the difference between great pro wrestling and okay pro wrestling is not how well you execute a Canadian destroyer, but your reaction to the action in the ring.
Yep.
When things are happening to you, you have to make the appropriate face, or you lose the magic of the performance. And Johnny Gargano apparently has a mannequin face when he wrestles.
Yeah. It was interesting.
Yeah.
And sorry, I don't want to push this on any longer. It's interesting you bring that up because about 1 or 2 years ago, Havoc used to actually share its facility with a pro wrestling training school run by and of course now I can't remember his name. He used to actually wrestle TNA. In fact, I think one of the TNA champs. But I was there one night after our class was done, and two of the guys who were getting ready for a match were doing it. And the amount of time that the coach had spent, especially coaching one guy who was supposed to be, one guy was kind of playing the heavy destroyer who just no-sells everything.
Right.
And because and I wrestled with that guy, and he was a big, strong guy. But the other guy, he was really selling us like, you have to show me how tired you are all the way to the back of the room.
Yep. Sell that arm the whole match, boy. Not just, not just when you're twisting it. So Roadhouse, just real quick, it had a budget of $15 million. It made 61.6 and has been determined to be a cult classic. It was also, fairly successful in its time, but I think it just sort of, I think it was initially regarded as just kind of silly and has since become like part of the cultural fabric of at least the United States. So I'm not going to kill the whole podcast with a long plot synopsis. Suffice to say, we have Dalton. He has a tortured past of sorts that we do not really learn a whole lot about. But he is drafted into the service of cleaning up this honky tonk in another part of town. They have, the small town is under the thumb of the mob, and he wants him to come in and sort of clean the place up, get rid of some of the mob boss's men, make it a nice place because he wants to refurbish this bar. He wants to make it nice. He wants to make money, but they can't do that if every week people are trashing the place. So he comes in. First, he starts firing the staff that are stealing. He also fires poor Terry Funk because Terry Funk works for the mob.
It was because he tried to change the rule to an I Quit match.
So Terry Funk had to go home because his horse was sick. Nobody.
He loved that jackass.
Oh, cactus. Like nobody getting these references except wrestling fans.
I'm not getting these references.
It's fine. Sean and I are speaking a new language. Anyway, you have to know a lot about Terry Funk, and I've heard a lot of wrestling podcasts.
Shaka when the wolves fell.
So anyway, long story short, they start to make some headway with the bar. We talked about the whole "be nice" speech. Patrick Swayze tells the whole staff, for the love of God, get him to go outside. You don't have to fight. Don't learn to de-escalate. And of course, the very famous phrase, "Be nice." Someone calls you a cocksucker, be nice. And like everybody, it's 1989, and everyone's like, a cocksucker, oh! And they all fall over the fainting couch. So,
oh my, I have the vapors.
Yeah, exactly. Needless to say, the mob boss is none too pleased with this. We also kind of have a day in the life of Patrick Swayze in this town. He buys a car, he finds a place to live, he's making friends, he's having connections, all this. And this is all basically a long setup to every single one of these will be attacked by the mob. Every last one of them. His car, the place to live, the auto body shop that repairs his car gets burnt to the ground. It leads to it all leads to a final confrontation to where the mob is just dead set on killing Patrick Swayze, and Patrick Swayze has declared war, I tell you, on the mob. And so, and in the middle of this, they kill poor Sam Elliott. Poor Sam Elliott,
who comes into the movie and steals every scene he's in.
Right, and then dies because he stole the movie. Like, we can't have you upstaging Patrick Swayze. Let's kill him. This leads to an Iron Man 3 style raid on the compound by Patrick Swayze. Where at this point we've had at least a dozen explosions, and so this is just one more. And then I have to say this because it's a beat in the movie and it needs some examination. Over the course of the movie, we learn that Patrick Swayze killed a guy in Memphis, and he did it in self-defense, like an old country song. But movies would have you believe killing a guy isn't a big deal, but apparently it is, and it weighs on him, and he's traumatized. And this is why he thinks he's no good, and when people try to get close to him, he pushes them away, etc., etc. It's also why he's, doing the bouncing, because he wants to be in a job where no one will know him and he won't hurt anyone. And so at some point in the movie, he is threatened by one of the big goons, one of the minor bosses, and he kills him, and Patrick Swayze kind of has like, what have I done? I killed the rabbit moment. Of course, the doctor that he's in love with, the love interest of this movie, sees that and goes, "What have you done? You killed the rabbit." And so we get to the final scene.
His throat out.
He certainly did, Ollie. I was just going to talk about in that craft review, but yeah, he done ripped this guy's throat out. I'll get back to that in a minute.
I had to wind that back to see what he
did he do. What?
Out.
Yeah, I know. I looked at that too.
Seriously. The way he had his hand gripped, I thought we were about to get a Swayze Ma moment. Cover your heart, henchman. Cover your heart.
Kalima.
And then I ran back watching.
It's the 5 steps of death.
He snatched his throat out. Got it.
Just I want to finish the plot synopsis so we can talk, but I have to say this. I was watching that on TikTok live. Like, I'm watching them because apparently passive entertainment is the best entertainment these days. So I'm watching a movie and TikTok is watching me watch the movie. 2024, everyone. And I'm commenting and I'm laughing and I'm having a good old time with my friends on TikTok. And then he rips the guy's throat out and I'm having this like blink twice moment. Like, did he just rip his throat out? Because there's something you don't see every day. And I watch a lot of violent movies. That's a first. So yeah. So he kills the guy. And we get to the end of the movie, and he has the boss dead to rights. He's about to kill him, and this is where the hero's arc finally finds its end point. He learns to show mercy, and then somebody else kills the boss because
like five people kill the boss.
Yeah. Everybody else who the mob boss has harmed comes back in like the Avengers and fucking takes him out.
More like the scene from RoboCop. They all have shotguns.
Well, get on with it, motherfuckers. Fucking Stringer and the Wire. There it is. Mark it on the bingo card, Andrew. So that's Roadhouse. I want to start I'm going to start the discussion. I want to get your guys' input, obviously. I'm not going to talk too long, but I do need to bring this up because we've kind of touched on it a few times now. And it's a big point of comparison, which we'll get back to when we get to it, with the new one. Something Robert and I have talked about, the Kobayashi Maru in Star Trek. The Kobayashi Maru that's talked about in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is great because it's this thing that defines Kirk as a person, but you never see it. You only hear about it, kind of like the robbery in Reservoir Dogs.
It's the noodle incident.
Yeah, it's used as a character thing. It's not supposed to be an event you need to see, but more to the point, it allows you as the audience to use your imagination and think of what the Kobayashi Maru might have been like for Kirk. That's its effectiveness. Also, and this is the difference between movies set in 1982 versus movies made in 2022, and that is movies back then didn't think the audience were dumb as shit. So it assumed you had an imagination and an attention span, and that when they talked about the Kobayashi Maru, you could just imagine it and they could move on with the movie. And then years later, they do Star Trek with Chris Pine, and it assumes you're half a moron, that you're developmentally disabled, and you can't imagine this shit for yourself and have to show you the Kobayashi Maru, ruining its effectiveness for all time. And here, to your point that you were talking about, Sean, they don't talk much about Memphis in this movie. They allude to it once or twice, but they don't do any flashbacks. He does not have... There's no scene of Patrick Swayze staring off into the middle distance, talking to his beloved, revealing the truth about himself. He doesn't ever talk about Memphis. Everything about Memphis that's affecting him, all the trauma that he carries, is all in Patrick Swayze's eyes. It is a subtle act of beauty to see an actor act with their eyes, but Patrick Swayze, God help me, pulls it off. And everything you need to know about him, why he's acting the way that he is, why he's doing the reluctant hero routine, is all in his eyes, and it's all because of this barely mentioned incident in the past. I'm going to give you guys a chance to react to that. First Andrew, and then Sean. So just focusing, because we are going to have to compare it to what they do with Jake Gyllenhaal, but for right now, let's just focus on 89. What are your thoughts on how they handled his barely touched on trauma in the movie?
I think I'm glad we're going here, because this is something I want to talk about as a strength of this movie. Is it's the neat trick of pulling off a lot of exposition with not so much obviously telling the audience, but doing it through how everyone else reacts to him.
Yeah.
So I mean, Memphis is a big part of that, but I think you also pick up a lot on who this guy is, on how everyone else reacts to him. So how the other bouncers in his own club react to him, how the guys in the new club who've heard of him react to him. And I think the one that kind of hit me is actually the absolute legendary Jeff Healey, who provided all the music in the original Roadhouse. Like, you immediately see him walk up to the blind guy, and the blind guy's like, "Hey man, it's so good to see you again." That tells you a lot about what that character is. Because this isn't a guy who goes around pushing around everybody who can. You know he's formidable, but you also know he's at least a decent human being to some level as well. And that does a lot of work.
He's sort of the walking avatar of all martial arts, in that this is to be used as necessary, not as a thing to bully.
To some level, yeah, but I think it's funny when you were talking about kind of movie comparisons. The one I thought of where they use this trick again very well is actually from 2014, First John Wick.
Yeah, very accurate.
There's a ton of stuff you learn about John Wick even before he picks up a gun, and you get a real sense of who that guy is. But and yeah, Mark, I mean, definitely, I think, you know, from a philosophical point of view, that, you know, we're going to get into the deep stuff here, but it's like, there is that degree of element of, you know, this is it's the final arbiter. Actually, I'll use that. It's from a martial arts book that I have, but combat in a lot of ways is the final arbiter. It's not. It's not the other one I always hear is. It's not the first answer, or it's not the first answer, but when it is, it's the only answer.
Yep. Sean, go ahead and give me your thoughts here on this, and then we'll get into the fun stuff that everyone wants to hear us talk about, kicking people through windows. But let's get there. Let's talk about trauma first. What did you think of how they handled Memphis in the movie?
Well, first of all, great minds think alike, but Andrew stole my comparison I was just about to make.
It's fun when we have more than one person, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because that was the first. When I was sitting there, all of a sudden that came to mind, and I was thinking about how everybody, every time in John Wick, initially when they first encounter him, when he encounters strangers, it's always, "Afternoon, John. Here you're working again."
Yep.
But it's never with a tone like they're trying to warn him, "Don't do this. You stay out of trouble. We don't want to have to come take you down." It's more of, "I think I know the answer, but I really want you to tell me I'm wrong. John, you working again?"
Right.
But it tells you everything that you need to, that he's both, without going into too much of it, that he's both respected and feared. And the reason I kind of blurted out that it's the noodle incident is because I would love to know whether this or Calvin and Hobbes came out first. But the noodle incident kind of became a trope because it's one of those things where it gets brought up as a running joke in certain strips, like very occasionally. And you can always tell something by how they react to it, but there's almost always kind of an unspoken assurance that, don't worry, you really don't need to know what actually happened. You just need to know that something happened. It's the difference between something like alluding to this, or in Silence of the Lambs, the anecdote about Hannibal Lecter. I think it's he rips a nurse's eye out, bites off part of her face, and his pulse never rose above 50 beats per minute. Yeah. It's something like that. It's never something that you're going, "Oh well, shit, I need to see that. I need to know more about this." But it's just something that's there as italics, as an underline, as bold in the type. This one isn't like the others. So I really appreciated that economy of storytelling, and it also helped the pacing too, in that it doesn't get you bogged down too much in his backstory. It just kind of keeps everything moving towards the finale at what does not feel like 2 hours. But one last thing that kind of goes under the radar a little bit when you're comparing the first two is Patrick Swayze feels more haunted, but also restrained and in control of himself.
Yeah.
Whereas they kind of maybe overplay it with Jake a little bit, and end up just kind of making him a very scary man. They almost make him Dexter Morgan like.
Yeah.
In patches by the
I was gonna say, I don't get the sense that Patrick Swayze is a sociopath, and I do with Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal, very American Psycho.
Yeah,
Stop me before I kill again, as opposed to Dalton, as Patrick Swayze's Dalton, which is just, I don't want to kill again. Please stop putting me in a position where I might.
From the moment someone puts that knife in Jake's side, and you see how he reacts to it, that's where he starts to become far less kind of instantly sympathetic and respectable than Swayze's did. But again, I also have to keep in mind, this movie's trying to do its own thing, so I'm not going to sit here and lambast it. I'm just going to take probably the cop out and say I prefer Patrick's take on the story and on the character over Jake's.
I'll second that, and I'll hold my thoughts on Gyllenhaal until we get to the 2024 review. So
please. All right, so let's talk about the fun stuff. So when everyone talks about Roadhouse to the point where, you know, Family Guy made a joke about it. Roadhouse, you know, it's all about the fight scenes. We're here having an ascendant intellectual film deconstruction conversation about the movie, and nobody gives a shit. I do. That's why we're doing it. But let's face it, all anyone cares, all anyone watches Roadhouse for is to watch Patrick Swayze kick people. So I'm going to talk about that, but it also, I'm going to use it as my way of dealing with some of the filmcraft elements, more specifically the pacing of the movie. It's an interesting movie in that for a lot of it, you don't quite know where it's going. And I found myself asking for at least the first half of it, why did they make this movie? Because it's like, well, let's follow this. A bouncer cleaning up a bar, there's not a lot of high stakes in. You know, it's like, you know, we want to, you know, Three Amigos had more of a stake to it. We were trying to save the entire town from El Jefe, whatever the hell his name is. But here it's just like, we just want to save this one bar. And it blossoms out into more of like, we have to save the town from the mob. But that's kind of the beauty, and this is what I was getting to. It's why I kept going. The beautiful thing about Roadhouse is you really don't know what it is you're watching until you're about more than halfway through it.
Yep.
And by that point, you're committed. That's a nice touch, and that's something I see a lot of these days in terms of pacing and screenwriting and filmcraft. It's that they really take you for this ride where you're really unsure, and then you finally get to like, oh, that's why I'm watching this. And by that point, you're like, well, now I got to see how it ends. Does he save the town? So there's that. But in a lot of the movie, there's Robert and I talk about this on Damn You Hollywood. There's now like a formula where every X amount of minutes you have to have an action sequence. And you would be tricked into thinking that that's how this movie was paced. But I just think it was, each fight sort of builds on itself. Every fight had a purpose. It's not just, well, it's, you know, 20 minutes have passed or 10 minutes have passed. We need to throw someone out a window.
We need our first act culmination.
Yeah, this more felt like these were beats in the story, and so they may have been fights, but the fights told a story too. Again, kind of like pro wrestling. There's a lot of parallels there. If I didn't have the new one to compare it to, and you were asking me what did you think of the fights in Roadhouse, they're fine. It's fun to watch Patrick Swayze. I mean, he throws a beautiful kick. I mean, like that's like the best thing about his fighting, because the rest of it's kind of whatever. Who gives a fuck? But when he throws that roundhouse, he gets really good extension. He has a nice spin. Like, he has a dancer's grace. No shit, he was the lead in Dirty Dancing. And it looks awesome to watch. So I rather enjoyed that. And I'll throw it over to you, Andrew, for your filmcraft elements. And, you know, I'm sure you have a shit ton to say about the fight choreography. This is it. This is your moment, boy.
All right, good stuff. Maybe I'll start off. I think I totally agree with, I'll totally agree with your take that, you know, the action and the action and the scenes in this do have purpose to them. Like, they're builds, they're everything like that. And I'll probably disagree with you a little bit. I actually even find the first half of this movie is compelling in terms of his quest to try and make this bar better. Because I think that they do it really smart, and I'm watching it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is that first complete kind of barn burner that happens at the start, just showing how horrible this place is.
Sure.
And then you get to see that trick, because I think that's, again, something they tell about this character is that he does all these things, but what did these things translate to?
Right.
So, like, why is he buying a new car? Why does he have a bunch of tires in the back? That sort of thing. And then you start to see that kind of methodical approach to how is he going to fix this bar. But yeah, I'd say in terms of the way the fights tell the story, move it forward and everything like that, I would definitely agree. I'm going to get into some personal biases here, so people will probably at me for this one. There's like a decided shift in the way fight choreography has been done in the last 40 years, for lack of a better phrase. Like, particularly, and we're kind of still in the old mode, going from like basically particularly in the US, like from the 1980s through to about, I'm going to say about 1995, 1999 is when you start to get the shift. And I won't get into that right now. Sean, I think you've read part of my stuff on that. But basically, as opposed to like having real exchanges where, you know, one guy's throwing, then there's a parry, a block or something like that, somebody comes back the other way, you very much have people taking turns kicking each other. And that's kind of it's a bit of, to use the wrestling parlance, it's a bit of a spot fest.
Yeah.
You have somebody do punch,
So,
punch,
real
big
quick,
kick, big kick.
I know you don't watch a lot of
punch,
independent
punch,
wrestling.
punch.
I know you don't watch a lot of independent wrestling, a lot of especially a lot of trash wrestling, but there's a thing people do now, and you might have actually seen it in All Elite Wrestling, where two guys will literally sit two folding chairs in front of each other and take turns hit each other in the face. It's as fake as a $3 bill, and then the most annoying thing in pro wrestling, which is filled with annoying things, but it's a really good example of the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's something I find in a lot of fight scenes going up to about the kind of the transitional period is about 95 to about 99. So there's a whole written article at some point to be done about comparing that change in terms of Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter. Because those are two movies in very different paradigms when it comes to the nature of the way you choreograph fights.
I'm reminded of two things that I read actually. One was a quote from Lee Marvin that I read ages ago, and it always stuck with me because I started watching action movies differently and started finding, as I watch movies from different eras, I started finding it very true. He once said that he thought the best way to depict violence in movies is to make it so brutal and so real and so authentic that the average person wouldn't even think about going out and trying it themselves.
Yeah.
It's the way to absolutely scare the imitatability out, scare the monkey see, monkey do out of people.
Yeah. And to that end, I'd kind of say that's maybe more towards what 2024 is going for, but here I'll let you continue.
Yeah. And the other thing, because again, it's another wrestling related thing. We really keep coming back to that often tonight. I don't know why. Maybe it is in the sense of, putting a match together, but I was thinking about something that Bryan Danielson was saying about how wrestling changed for him after his broken neck.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying that Stone Cold Steve Austin was one of the first people who got a hold of him. And Austin told him that after his own neck break and his own ring work became limited, what he did to freshen up his character, extend his career, and really freshen himself up was he went from being a mechanic, a technical wrestler, to, he said he sat down and watched a lot of Jerry Lawler's classic Memphis matches. And the way he and Bill Dundee would punch and brawl, and started to make that more of his style, so he would be less dependent on mat work. And Bryan said it absolutely turned his career around going forward after his comeback.
May I interject something?
Yeah, sure.
The Miz and Daniel Bryan's fight on SmackDown, which is which is right up there with Paul Heyman's pre-Survivor Series speech on SmackDown, is one of my favorite moments in modern professional wrestling, because the Miz was absolutely right. When the Miz looked at Bryan Danielson and was just like, when Bryan Danielson looked at the Miz and was like, "You wrestle like a coward," and Bryan Danielson was like, "You're the one with the broken neck." And there was more to it than that, but people are watching, and I don't want to get too much bogged down in this. But the point was, the point the Miz was making was something that Vince McMahon has been saying: "We're making movies here, pal. This is not a real fight."
Well, and then thinking about what Bryan said and about what Austin told Bryan, all the proof that you need that works is go back and watch the main event of WrestleMania 17. That is not a wrestling match. That is a fucking 30-minute They Live caliber fight. And that's exactly what it was supposed to be.
Right.
And Austin, with the way he so successfully adopted that shift, was able to make it everything that the story required it to be. And that's what Patrick Swayze does really well in OG Roadhouse in terms of his style. And I'll give kind of the devil is due for what Amazon's Roadhouse is. I think Jake is every inch is effective. It just depends on which one you like, on being a matter of, well, number one, which one do you prefer? And number two, which story do you prefer? Because they're both serving their respective stories. I'm gonna say something now. It's kind of me setting a small fire, and we're just gonna let it go for a bit because I need it to burn, and we'll come back to it later with marshmallows and hot dogs.
Your preference for which your preference for which does the better fights, the original Roadhouse or Roadhouse 24, comes down to, do you like practical effects or do you like CGI? And let me tell you, there's a lot of people out there that want to see the big, pretty, smooth CGI and don't like the janky special effects. But then there are a lot of us who very much enjoy the janky special effects, as horrible as it was, of Arnold Schwarzenegger plucking his fucking eye out in The Terminator. You know, I often think about like The Phantom Menace versus A New Hope, in that, you know, George Lucas, you know, had to invent his own special effects department, and in many ways the special effects department that modern movies would carry on for decades on. And people, and it's beloved for a variety of reasons, but not the least of which is people adore the practical effects of A New Hope, the models, the using of wires and close-up shots and that sort of thing to produce what becomes this giant space epic. And then there's The Phantom Menace, which is practically an animated movie. But if I sat my 10-year-old down and said, now choose the Battle of Yavin, or choose the final scene in The Phantom Menace, he would probably, knowing my son, he would choose the former. My daughter would absolutely choose the final battle in The Phantom Menace, because it looks cooler, it looks smoother, it looks brighter. And neither is wrong. But that's the thing, is like they use so much CGI in the fights in the new one versus the practical fight choreography of yore in Roadhouse, which is charming, but not everyone's bag, Sean.
Thomas Jane, Kevin Nash, The Punisher.
Yeah.
I rest my case.
That involves actually stabbing somebody, though.
We talked about that, Pat and I. My last word on Roadhouse, and then we're moving on to, because we're nigh on an hour here, where we'll move on to the new one. I like the movie. It's goofy. It's if Chris Bailey were here, he'd run in, hit me with a chair, and say, "You're not supposed to deconstruct a movie like this. You're just supposed to enjoy it with your pants off." I don't know why you'd have your pants off, Chris. That's something we should talk about later.
He's hanging out in the garage eating scrunions.
Are we supposed to wear pants?
Did you hear?
I've already lost one job today. Don't make me lose another one because I missed a memo.
Sorry, Sean. No, Sean. Look, much like a resort in Florida, clothing is optional on this podcast.
Okay.
Listen.
Confirm, I'm wearing pants.
All right. Glad we covered all that, you literal people. Did you hear me call where Chris is from the Alabama part of Canada, Andrew?
Oh.
These are for you, Bailey.
Texas. That is mean. That's worse than any joke I was
Where's
ever
Bailey?
about.
Where's Bailey from?
Newfoundland.
Oh no, no, that's right. Allison's husband is from Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia is awesome.
No, he's from either Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. It's one of them, and I forget which.
Do not mix those two up.
I believe Bailey is from Newfoundland. Now he's gonna tell me he's from Nova Scotia, and I fucked this all up.
Doesn't matter. Bailey's definitely from Newfoundland,
okay.
But like doing the whole is a cultural thing. Like you do not mess up the Newfoundlanders from the You never refer to Newfoundland as part of the Maritimes, and you try and keep Nova Scotia and Newfoundland straight.
God's honest truth. I meant no offense.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. But Nova Scotia is awesome.
Roadhouse is a very
Newfoundland. I hear it's great. It is definitely unique, though.
This podcast brought to you by the Tourism Board of Canada. Roadhouse is a great movie.
What about Winnie Poops a lot?
I think if I have, so it's like, so what doesn't work? What don't I like about it? It's a slight movie. I don't even know how many people pick up the stuff about trauma, and neither movie deals with it particularly well. It kind of acknowledges it exists. It's a motivation for the character. It's part of their characterization. But as a mental health professional and somebody who also studies film and sometimes merges the two, neither movie handles post-traumatic stress disorder well. And I think if you're going to touch on it, you should probably comment on it. And also neither one does very well at all. So that was kind of frustrating. And it's one of the things that I think there are certain things about the Roadhouse 89 that are not so shallow, and then there were things about it that are very shallow. and frustratingly so. But I think it gets away with being shallow because nobody wants anything deep from it. They want it to just be 2 hours of Patrick Swayze kicking people. And the fact that there are dramatic beats in the movie is like probably annoys a big portion of that audience.
You know what I kind of compare it to on some level? One of my absolute favorite movies, Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim is a little bit like that, where it's like, it's giant robots kicking each other, but it's also kind of this really
giant robots kicking CGI monsters. Let's get that straight.
Yeah, monsters and robots kicking each other.
Yes.
But then it's also like the relationships between people and some trust and trauma and history and those sorts of things, which you also love too. But it's got that everything for everybody.
David and I have had the biggest laugh over the ending of Pacific Rim in the biggest will they or won't they moment, and they don't, giving this audience a giant case of blue balls. Oh, how David and I laughed about that, and it makes Pacific. It's like our favorite. I know there are robots and monsters in Pacific Rim, and that's the best part of the movie. A man and a woman don't fuck on screen. It's awesome.
They hug. They don't even kiss.
No, they just go to. It's very much like an end of the workday moment between a man and a woman. They're just like, well, good job. I'll see you tomorrow. Yes, tell the wife and kids I said hello, and they fuck off. It's great. But
and then they made Uprising. Oh God.
Let's not talk about that. We never can we not? And we never mention the Uprising again.
Next movie.
Yes. So your final word here on that's it. If people are like, what's wrong with Roadhouse? It's a little slighter maybe than it should be. Oh yeah, I know my biggest complaint about this movie is the setting. It's drab in a way that I mean, like when I talked about Killers of the Flower Moon and it was all muted colors, the movie is sort of the color of mud, but the mud is gorgeous and that's the way it needed to be. I'm gonna get to you, Sean. Where here, and it's one of the things I think is superior about the new one to the old one because Key West is gorgeous. I mean, I won't do a big tourism board thing on it, but you should all visit Key West. But here it's the bar kind of gets prettier over time. It's almost like a character in the movie, but the rest of the landscape is just this dusty, quiet town. And I got bored watching it by the end of the movie. And I want it to be saved because I want the humans to be saved, but the town itself could have burnt the fuck down for all I care. Go ahead, Sean.
But by all means, folks, ask me why I want to leave rural Missouri.
Thank you. I'm glad you said I have something to say, and I waited for you for that line. That's great.
The only thing about it is, no, you know what? Actually, you get rid. Hang on, I need to call in an expert opinion on this one. Hey, Anne, God. Can you come in here and just kind of stay off camera?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
I know why. It's okay.
The last time you did this to a woman, she wouldn't leave me for 10 years.
Go, friend.
Okay, so you haven't seen Roadhouse, right? Okay, it's set in a tiny rural podunk right outside Kansas City. Question 1, does Kansas City have a bunch of little bitty rural honky-tonk type podunks right outside city limits? And question 2, could you describe them if they do?
Yes, they do. At least when I was growing up, they're bigger now.
Well, keep in mind, the movie's set in 1989.
Okay, then, yes, they did. And number 2, it's just like living in any little small-minded, beer-drinking, liberal community ever.
But you would have just like the one rowdy honky tonk bar in one of those towns, probably, right?
At least 2 in Kansas City area.
At least 2. Okay, yep. That was all we need. Mark was saying that the setting looked a little bit drab, and I'm just like, he ain't been to rural Missouri in a while, has he?
He only has to go 5 minutes from where I used to live.
At least 3 honky tonks still in existence in the Kansas City area today.
Wonderful. Andrew, give your final thoughts here. Give your final thoughts here on the movie, and then I want to quick read the accolades, and we'll get into 2024.
Oh
Well, first thing I'll say, I think Calgary still has at least 2 or 3 honky tonks left as well, and they actually look a lot like the one in the movie.
Super.
But you know what? Yeah, I just came away like really liking this movie. Like, I like the characters. I actually did like the setting, and I like the way that you kind of see it progress as Dalton works there.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of again that really efficient show don't tell piece. I like some of the subtlety of the villain as well. Like, I mean, I think I just saw the scene, but it's like, you know, you show he's a jerk because he doesn't know how to drive and he's swerving all over the road, and then you start to build the actual menace of this guy. Like, it's a really efficient in a lot of ways. It's got some heart to it. It's got some nice bits that they keep on coming back to. That's good. And I mean, I think it far exceeded my expectations in comparison to. The only thing you learn from this movie is that kicking solves all your problems. So I really enjoyed it.
Okay. So I told you how successful it was monetarily. Roadhouse was nominated but did not win 5 Golden Raspberry Awards for Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Patrick Swayze. Oh, poor Patrick. Worst Supporting Actor, Ben Gazzara. Worst Director, and Worst Screenplay. The film is listed in Golden Raspberry Awards founder John Wilson's book, The Official Razzie Movie Guide, as one of the 100 most enjoyably bad movies ever made. I'm going to go ahead and say I think without nostalgia glasses and without sort of the idiocy of the low-hanging fruit opinion of kicking things is good and makes movies good, I think we made a fair case for this was not the worst movie I've ever seen. In fact, it's far better than I think people give it credit for. It's just also amazing. All right. Which brings us to, let me just say this. After last year's White Men Can't Jump, the hurdle to get over in terms of modern remakes of movies that didn't need a remake was quite low. So I'll just give this away now. Roadhouse is better. The new Roadhouse is better than the new White Men Can't Jump. But Andrew's home movies of his kids vomiting is also better than White Men Can't Jump. I would much rather watch that. God, that was terrible. And if you would like to hear me and Jason having an existential crisis during our review of White Men Can't Jump, it's in our archives.
You're also about one more zinger away from convincing me to watch it.
Oh, Sean, if you've got nothing else to do, please do. But do so high and with no pants on or underwear.
Let's see. No pants, check. High, check. Not much to do for the foreseeable future.
Great.
Check.
Okay. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to watch it, but don't tell me what you think of it until you're mad at me for something, and then tell me.
I get mad at you so rarely, though.
You have to hang on to it for a while. But that's the thing. Like, you did this wrong and this bothered me. And White Men Can't Jump. Why you made me watch that, you fucker? That's what I want to hear. Roadhouse. All right. So there's no budget, obviously, because there's no gross. I'll just get into. I already read sort of the demographics of this thing before. I do want to talk really briefly about the Doug Liman's fucking whining about this movie. Just because this would be the place to sort of discuss this.
There was something that I just realized I never looked up and I meant to.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck took this thing so long to release?
So a couple of things. One, this was supposed to be an all-girl version of Roadhouse starring Ronda Rousey. That's what this started out.
Oh, I remember that now.
Yeah, and that got mothballed as the world realized men don't like women. So stop making movies for men starring women. It doesn't work. I'm being really facetious, but that's kind of that's kind of what happened. Is there was this movement to take everything that men like and put women in it, so women will watch too. And then, as it turns out, and I don't know if you know this or not, but men and women like different shit. And as it turns out, also the women who like the men stuff the way it is, not starring women doing women stuff. And if you need to hear me talk about this more, Robert and I have documented this a number of times on Damn You Hollywood. He brought up a really great study they did with children and toys, where if you hand like a boy a Batman doll and he doesn't know what it is, and he says, well, what is this? So this is Batman, and this is what Batman does. The boy will play with the doll as Batman is told, as they will do the things that Batman does. When you give the Batman to the girl, hang on. When you give the Batman to the girl makes Batman do what the girl is doing, which I've never heard a better explanation for the differences between men and women until then. It's amazing.
I was going to say, it sounds a lot to me, a lot like the same principle as the reason why so many women get genuinely irritated that stuff like pink NFL jerseys are marketed for women when really they would just rather just have the team colors.
I can't remember the girl's full name. It's something Apgar on TikTok, but she does these really, really great. If you know anything about TikTok, a lot, like half of it is someone talking to themselves in different clothing or a hat or something, usually up against a white background. She does that, but she does it with NFL teams. And she's clearly a very knowledgeable, very smart, very talented NFL fan. But in every one of these, she's wearing just regular NFL clothes. She's not doing it, in a girlied up Kansas City jersey. She's just wearing the jersey as a point to what you're making there. But so Roadhouse 2024, we have Jake Gyllenhaal, who plays next UFC fighter. He is working in a bar. He gets recruited by what's the actress's name? Jessica Williams, I believe. Yes, yeah, Jessica Williams. He gets recruited by Jessica Williams to come to her bar in Key West because ruffians keep coming in and tossing the place, and she's losing tons of money due to the ongoing destruction. So please come in and help me maintain order here. So first he says no, but then he says yes. And I actually now remember why. He's suicidal is the problem here. He is haunted by the trauma of a previous incident, which we will learn he killed a guy in a UFC cage during a fight. It was one of those, and I do need to talk about this, but
I have thoughts.
I have a lot. I watched this live on TikTok. This was I did another watch along, and I did it there. And I looked at the movie, and I looked at TikTok, and I looked at the movie, and I looked at TikTok, and I said, "That's not how that would go. There's no fucking way they'd allow that to happen. Not even close. First of all, at this point, if you flick a guy and he can't defend himself, that's it. The fight's over."
That referee who waited that long to stop it would
Yeah.
have a restraining order keeping him at least one zip code away from any MMA cage.
Not to mention, if you really ran after a guy after he was knocked cold on the ground like that, they would have dragged you. They would have dragged you out of that. Dana White personally would have dragged you out of that cage and shot you in the parking lot.
Oh,
There's
shit.
no fucking way that happened.
Renato Sobral held a rear naked choke for a few seconds too long.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of the rare instances of Dana keeping to his word, he made no bones about it after the fight. Said, "You'll never see him in the UFC again."
Yeah.
Well, what's his name?
Paul Daly?
Heel hook guy. Can't remember now.
Husamar Palhares.
Husamar Palhares, yes.
Yes.
Another guy who's never come back, thank God.
Paul Daly. Paul Daly
Yes.
his wasn't even anything terribly damaging. Like
He just hit a
Husamar
guy
hit
after, after the bell.
Yeah. He just gave Koscheck, just one little cheap shot.
Right.
And Dana said the same. Weirdly, this is one of the only things he's ever stuck to his guns on
I was about to say.
as an MMA promoter.
Yeah, Paul Daly
I
hit
have a
somebody after the bell, and they
whole
strapped
thing
Paul
on
Daly.
this, trust me.
And they strapped Paul Daly to a rocket and sent him to his home planet. Like that was the end of Paul Daly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Or AKA Bellator.
You said it, not me.
Anyway, so yeah, he killed a guy. We'll find out over the course of the movie he killed a guy in a cage due to his lack of anger management. So anyway, but we don't know that just now. But he is struggling with it to the point that it drives him to suicide. That he barely gets past getting hit by a train, and he decides, well, maybe instead I'll go clean up a bar. So he goes. So off to Key West he goes, and he's there. It's if you've ever been to any kind of like waterside bar, it looks like all of them. It's got sort of a tiki hut aesthetic. It's very open air. There's seashells everywhere. It's just lovely. It's the kind of place you get some. Exactly. It's the kind of place you get a plate of peel and eat shrimp and and a rum runner, and you just have yourself a time. Then we meet the ruffians. The ruffians come in, and Conor McGregor. Hang on. Jake Gyllenhaal takes the ruffians outside and proceeds to kill them like he's Aragorn. Jesus Christ. Like he just takes out the whole crew. And I tell you, one of my favorite goons in the history of movies is the one guy who's super polite.
Yeah. He's so good.
Oh my God. He has some of the best lines in this movie. He's like, there's really no need for violence. I just like to write
Mo. Oh, I love Mo.
Yeah,
he's
interesting
awesome.
guy.
Mo just
anyway,
wants to live his best life on his bike.
so as it
all Mo
turns out,
wants.
we have old money in Key West. We have the son of old money because the dad's in prison. And I will get into this later because it's one of my major issues with the plot of this movie. Has bought up all the land in a certain area, but the one holdout is this bar, and she won't sell. Now, they're not above a criminal enterprise like, say, burning the motherfucker to the ground.
After
However,
it's closed.
they instead employ the services of ruffians to trash the place so that she'll be upset and sell. And when that doesn't work because they've called in Jake Gyllenhaal, they just keep doing more of that. It's the dumbest thing.
It isn't, when it comes to your motives, it isn't always a good sign when the ancillary characters in the movie are about as confused about what's going on as you are.
Yeah.
That's not always a good thing.
So that's all that this movie is. The villain wants to build a giant resort like there are everywhere in Florida. Summer clothing optional. You may have heard me mention that before. Anyway, and so that's like the whole movie is the mob boss or developer boss both keep sending ruffians after Jake Gyllenhaal, and Jake Gyllenhaal keeps killing him, just keeps beating the shit out of him, just over and over and over again. And we're getting more graphic and more over the top and more violent as things go on. And then the best part of the movie happens. It's the part that makes me love this movie more than the old one, and it's the only thing. And it's because I'm a dope. It's Conor McGregor. First of all, opens up his first scene in the movie. They gave him all the steroids. They hit him with gamma radiation. He's the size of
White rays, the super soldier serum.
Yeah, he's the size of
vitamins.
my Camry, wide. Okay, he is just full of balloons. He looks like the Michelin Man.
He is a USADA PTSD attack.
I swear to God, Conor McGregor was fresh off.
He is
his
where the
role.
Russians have hid all their steroids.
Conor McGregor was fresh off his role as the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters 1984, and has the same smile through the course of the movie.
And with not a stitch of clothing that fucking fits him.
I was telling my son about this because, my son is exactly like me, including the same amount of humor. So fill in the blanks here. So I was like, hey, Jonas, we need to watch the new Roadhouse together. Conor McGregor is naked as the day is long. Just dick and balls everywhere. And he said, father, dick and balls. And I said, son, dick and balls. And he said, oh, joy. More dick and balls in my Roadhouse movie, because that's what the first movie was missing.
You can't convince me Conor is doing any actual acting in this
Oh
movie.
God, yes.
No, not at all. They gave that man a platter of coke.
The way I would put it is, on some level, Conor understood what this movie should have been.
Yeah, Conor's the only one in this movie, including the director.
It kind of reminds me somewhere between, appropriately enough, another Irishman, Colin Farrell as Bullseye.
Yeah.
Yes!
And Trevor Goddard as Kano from Mortal Kombat 95. Like, some of the line deliveries and some of the choices there are just gold.
So the only difference being in Daredevil, Colin Farrell actually made a character.
Yeah.
He actually is, granted, he doesn't have to, exhaust himself by suppressing his Irish accent throughout the entire shoot, but he's definitely crafting a memorable scene-stealing character.
Sure.
He did the same thing with Penguin.
Oh God,
in the Batman. Oh yeah.
Yep.
There is no digging deep for this one at all. Conor probably wasn't even aware there was a camera there.
Yeah.
I think all that really happened. I don't think there was a character. I think at some point Conor was on set and tried to give Jake a lovely bottle of Proper 12. Jake said thanks, but no thanks. And from there it was on like a pot of neck bones.
No,
honestly,
guys, here's what happened. They had a key grip walking around with a boom mic, but instead of having a boom mic on the end, it was a bottle of proper 12. That's how they got him to hit his marks. All they did was like reel it around, make sure the camera's in front so it's just off screen, and Connor's hitting his marks every time.
Have you ever seen documentary footage of someone shooting a safari? Because that's what this was like. They just kind of followed Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor's like a fucking animal. He doesn't know where the camera is or what it is.
All the Conor McGregor documentaries.
It's as if somebody watched him throw the what do you call it? The thing that you use to carry like boxes around.
The dolly, yeah. Someone just wanted to go reshoot.
Oh, Conor throwing a dolly? No way.
So Conor's right before his fight with the Russian who everyone loves, like name I can't remember. Yeah, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Sorry for everyone watching this, going, what's this with this movie? I'm tired. I'm sorry. I'm not remembering things, but yeah. So when Conor McGregor in the lead up to the fight with Nurmagomedov fucking threw the dolly at the window, and it was like Doug Liman
beforehand. Yep.
It was like Doug Liman just watched that and goes, "I want that. I just want that through the whole movie. Just throw dollies everywhere." Doug, you can't have him throw a dolly at Jake Gyllenhaal. Okay, he'll kill him. You just can't. It's like, well, can he hit him with it? No, Doug, it's not pro wrestling. You can't hit him with a dolly. Okay, well, can he act like he's doing it? And so Conor McGregor on coke and steroids and elephant tranquilizers and Molly and just everything. I swear to God, like they went back in a time machine using the DeLorean into the 70s and got lewds. They gave him lewd. They gave him everything.
He's currently sniffing the fungus that turned everyone into zombies in The Last of Us.
They got morphine from the Civil War and gave it to him, and they were like, okay.
He's on laudanum.
So Conor McGregor's great. He's just amazing in this movie. The other thing about him, and this is why I compared him to the Stay Puft Marshmallow, because his musculature is very Stay Puft, but also and again, I'm gonna being a film person, a film deconstructor. Somebody is here to review the art of filmmaking and specifically in this case directing. If you've ever directed an actor, we talked about this before. You have to react to things with your face. There's the art to acting with your face, and they gave up with Conor McGregor. This motherfucker smiles like a jack-o'-lantern through this entire movie, but the whole time.
But like he is kind of used perfectly. Like
yes,
they know how to use that particular asset very well.
Hang on, let me be clear. This is on trial, and let me be clear about my evidence. They used him perfectly.
This is a feature, not a bug.
This is amazing. Because I have to say, I'm watching this movie, and if I hadn't been on TikTok Live, I might have passed out during it. Like, I'm just not exactly totally enthralled. Then Conor McGregor shows up, and all pants are off. My eyes are bugging out of my head. I'm like, this is amazing. Anyway, so Conor McGregor shows up, and he's now he's the Kevin Nash from the Punisher movie. He's the heavy set to take out this killer that has just beset the mob boss on all sides. It does not go well. It's kind of like Conor McGregor beats the shit out of Jake Gyllenhaal, and Jake Gyllenhaal decides he's going to go home. And not content to just send Jake Gyllenhaal home, then they burn down the kid's bookstore that he bonded with earlier in the movie, and there's all kinds of stuff. And so Jake Gyllenhaal, just like in the first movie, he has had all he can stands, and he can't stand no more. So he is going to go after the villain. And there's a giant boat chase scene for some reason.
A yacht blows up.
And it ends with the boat crashing into the bar, and the mob and the boss dies. And then Conor McGregor and Jake Gyllenhaal have a Superman versus Batman-esque fight brought to you by Zack Snyder. And he kind of kills Conor McGregor, but not really in a scene that follows the credits. But the point of this is that the mob boss is dead. Evil has been defeated, and Jake Gyllenhaal can fuck off to his planet that he came from. Roadhouse.
Yeah, this is almost more of what Roadhouse is by reputation than Roadhouse actually is.
I have said, and this has been a mantra, this has been a drum I've been beating for a really long time now, that when they do these remakes, they have a list of things people like about the original, and that's what they do. There is no understanding of why it was popular. There is no understanding of what the movie was about. It is the porn parody version minus the porn of the original.
I have
someone had a lot of extra money and wanted to see what would happen if they let somebody write and direct a Roadhouse movie, but the caveat was that they had to remake it while only reading the Wikipedia for Roadhouse.
Go ahead, Andrew. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I have 2 words for you on that theory, Mark, because I remember this from 15 years ago, because I am the Radulich and Broadcasting historian. More dinosaurs.
MOAR, baby.
More dinosaurs. But anyway,
right. Go ahead. Tell me your thoughts. I'm gonna relinquish the floor here.
Many thoughts
for a while now. So go ahead. You have thoughts. Let's hear your thoughts.
I have many thoughts. So let's start with Dalton. I'm gonna talk about the UFC thing separately, but I'll start with this. I think Jake Gyllenhaal is a hell of an actor, but I think he also has the problem of having kind of 2 modes. He totally can pull off charming and affable and everything like that, which I think is what kind of the mode of the original Dalton is. The problem is his other mode is completely off-putting, weird, and a little bit of a sociopath, which he's also great in. Like, I mean, fucking Zodiac is one of my favorite movies, and he's great in it. And the problem is they couldn't decide which version of Jake Gyllenhaal they wanted to have on screen. And no, I mean that. Like, he's kind of playing off-putting sometimes. He's kind of playing affable. So I think that's kind of there's some consistency issues there, and I think that kind of goes through the entire movie, like even getting to the point where, you know, he wakes up and chooses violence.
Right.
It's after they burn the house down, so he just goes up and punches a guy in the throat. Like, no, I mean, that's literally what he does. It's like, at least when Swayze did that in the original movie, there was like an imminent threat of bodily harm to get a little technical. So there's a reason for him to cross that line.
Right.
With this one, he just chose to.
Right.
So there's kind of that difference. And I mean, I think there's definitely, and there's like interesting things that they kind of plant that they never pay off. Like Gyllenhaal kind of says, I'm afraid of myself.
Yeah.
And I think that I think if you have a good person who gets trained in things, there's always that little bit in the back of your head.
Let me help you here. When Dalton kills the guy, he instantly regrets it. He's under threat of death himself, so he did it in self-defense. But killing a guy is still killing a guy.
Yep.
And now this is the second time, and he is beset with guilt.
Yes.
When Jake Gyllenhaal kills a guy, he does it with all the passion of a librarian telling you where the documentary section is.
Yeah, and he starts turning into like a caper basically at that point, where he's like toting the guy around in a thing.
Yeah, so then this is a weird version of Weekend at Bernie's. We don't know what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's an inconsistency there, but like I said, there's this line where he says, like, I'm afraid of myself.
Right.
And like I've had that myself, knowing, everything, where it's like, okay, if I ever actually get anything, it'll either, your 2 worries are either that you're not good enough and you get hurt,
right,
or does the wrong part take over and you go too far.
Sure.
So having that in there as a character motivation and a point of things to talk about, I think is an interesting way to do that. And they even, in the first fight between him and McGregor says to him, there's something wrong with you, just like me. And like, that's an interesting kind of thread to tug at, but they never tug at it.
Right.
So that's one piece.
If you're gonna play around with the idea of I'm afraid of myself, what if I go too far and the monster comes out? You actually have to see him have a monster come out, and there needs to be consequences and stakes set up. There are none in this movie. None.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, I think that was kind of the problem, because I think they took away a lot of the dimension from the character, and I think they took away a lot of the dimension of the movie, because they just went to convention and they went to kind of gags and things like that. Like, of course they find him fighting in, backroom, unsanctioned MMA stuff. And, of course they can't think to burn the bar down or anything like that. And it's just a bunch of stuff like that. Like, again, going back to our buddy Mo, he's one of the most unconventional things in the movie.
Right.
Like,
he is very 2024.
Oh yeah. But there's even parts of this where it's like, they start talking about Hemingway. Like, wouldn't there? And I think his response when somebody mentioned something about Hemingway is like, "Oh yeah, I heard of him." It's like have him turn around and quote Hemingway back to the person.
Right.
Give him a little bit of that same depth that they gave Swayze's character. So I mean, I think that's a big part of it. Again, it leans on so much that you've seen before. You know what? Screw it. We're just going to talk about this one right now. We're going to talk about the whole UFC death thing.
Okay.
So I'm not going to talk about this necessarily from a movie point of view, but more from kind of a UFC point of view. So UFC, you've been big for about 20 years now. And at this point, like really big for 20 years now in terms of mainstream. And there have been movies made around MMA that you've never engaged in. There have been really good ones like Red Belt. There's been great ones like, well, actually, fuck it, Red Belt's great. But I mean, there's Warrior, that was great. And you haven't directly engaged on any of that. So the first movie in which you put your full weight behind, you film it at an event, you film at the weigh-ins, you put all of your personalities and thing, you have all of them dressed up in your gear and in your name, and your choice is to have somebody die in the octagon. What the actual blue fuck?
Let me point out the fact that they didn't need to do that, and they still could have done all those things.
Oh, exactly.
He could have fought this guy. He could have won. He could have lost, and all you needed to do was show him go back to the locker room and start another fight. Something happened. The guy touched his wife's tits. Whatever. It doesn't matter. But
he's the one that threw the dolly at the bus.
Yeah. There you go. He's he throws the dolly at the bus and actually kills a guy. Something.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think of it like this. If you really wanted to not go for something that's schlocky, low-hanging fruit, like what they do to describe Dalton's mental state in this movie, and you want to base it off something like that, if I'm in the same position, you know which two very specific fighters I go and research? Uriah Hall and Mark Kerr.
Yeah.
Hall, because you've got that moment where he had arguably, no, in fact, I'm all that inarguably, indisputably, the most terrifying knockout in the Ultimate Fighter history.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he nearly killed that guy.
That
spin kick. You saw the angel with the harp come out.
Yeah. Well, one of those highlights where it's like Joe Theismann's leg break. You would be okay if you never had to see it ever again. Right. But talk to him, and then actually even better, if you can't actually talk to Mark Kerr, you just go and watch the documentary The Smashing Machine and watch the fact that this hulking brute, with, as Napoleon Bonaparte described it, a physique that can be seen from low orbit, actually got very broken up about the idea of hurting anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go and look at that, and you've got plenty of fuel to kind of inform your depiction, not this kind of cheap, lazy representation of PTSD.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, I mean, part of my beef with this whole movie, even down to the fight scenes, which, you know, I'm going to put a pin in. I'm going to let Sean go to this next, and then we'll talk about fight scenes in a second. But like all the characterization, everything that this movie bugs me about this movie is very much at odds with what I know Doug Liman can do.
Sure.
Like, this is a guy who directed the first Bourne movie.
Right.
And he does all the things in that movie so much better than in this one.
Yeah.
Oh, the fight scenes in the Bourne movies, like Sean and I talked about them on Long Road to Ruin. Robin and I
think I
reviewed
was
at
there
least
for
one
that
of
one.
them. Yeah, you might have been.
I was, yep.
And we talked about how like the best parts of the Bourne movies, because it sure is fucking the plot, is, you know, are the fight scenes. And look, Jason Statham, Matt Damon is not exactly, you know, a professional fighter by any means, but what Doug Liman and the fight choreographers are able to do with him in those Bourne movies make him look like a ninja. He's awesome.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it's like that's one of those movies. The first Bourne Identity is one that I think fundamentally changed how a lot of fight scenes got shot and how they approached it in a lot of ways. Like, you started to see a bunch of stuff on there. Like, I mean, if you kind of take the end point of view, like, you know, that's kind of on the road to how you get to John Wick in some ways. But I mean, that's a whole other theory thing. I'm gonna stop for a minute, let you guys talk about some craft, but I wouldn't mind coming back just to talk about the fight scenes really quick.
I want to interject this, and then I'm going to throw it right to Sean. And I only want to say this because we have people watching, and I want to make this very, very clear. I said before they didn't have to do it the way they did it, but I want to be crystal clear about something. There's no way. I'm okay with suspension of disbelief, but when you do something that is so unbelievable and also makes the sport look bad, I got to call it out and tell you this was a bad choice.
Yep.
So the scene is they're having their UFC fight. Jake Gyllenhaal knocks him out. Look, you punch until to the point where we've seen kind of guys look at the referee going, "You ever going to stop this?" Like, that's okay. I'm okay with that much of it. I'm okay. A guy got killed in a boxing match not that long ago during, I think it's Alexander Usyk's first fight at heavyweight. A guy on the undercard got killed in a boxing ring. It happens. That's
I heard about that.
Yeah. And so it's entirely possible that in the course of a fight, Jake Gyllenhaal just hit him one too many times. The referee didn't stop it in time. And if you had just left it at that, that would have been good enough. That would have been enough to make someone's conscience really would really hurt someone's conscience. Okay. If you're a professional fighter and in the course of fighting with no other nefarious means, you actually kill a guy, you would feel awful about that and be in the kind of mental state that Jake Gyllenhaal is in. Where the movie goes wrong is they stop the fight, they separate him, and he goes back and keeps hitting him. At this point, the guy's already dead. He'd already died.
Yeah.
And now he's punching a corpse. And that is meant to say the point of the movie he's trying to make is look how awful Jake Gyllenhaal is in terms of he has no control over himself. He's now punching a dead guy because they got in a fight at the weigh-ins, essentially, is the story that they're telling. And I'm like, here's the problem. There's no way that would have happened. When you're down on the canvas, if people who don't watch the UFC or do, but have never paid attention to this much of it, once the fight is stopped, you as a fighter are not getting anywhere near that fighter again. Especially in the condition that guy was in, his team is in, the doctor is in, everybody is in that cage. There's 24 bodies standing between the fighter and his opponent in a case like that. So for Jake Gyllenhaal to have then, if you still really wanted to tell the story of Jake Gyllenhaal trying to go after him one more time, he'd have to punch the ref, the coaches, Dana White, the Lorenzo Fertitta, guys. There's just everybody's in that fucking cage. And so to the point where I'm watching this going, you've now made this more unbelievable than most fantasy movies. This is bullshit and it was utterly unnecessary. So now I needed to get that out there so people understand that what you're seeing in Roadhouse 2024 is so utterly fictional, it actually undermines the movie.
UFC would not have done this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But the problem is they're in such a position between the ESPN deal and everything else that bad press no longer exists.
I don't think it matters. I actually don't think it matters. I don't think anyone cares. I just think for the people listening to our podcast, I needed to kind of excise that demon and say, hey, there's no way they would ever let this happen in real life, and it's a disservice to the film. Go ahead, Sean.
I mean, Mark's got a point in that the instant, if you watch a fight, the second that fight gets waved off for any reason, it's actually kind of amazing just how quickly the seconds, the athletic commission officials, everybody pours into that cage.
Yeah.
There's no way. The instant it gets waved off, both corners are going to be in there. It's going to be right in front of the athletic commission. That's just not happening. But that kind of brings up something that I was thinking of just now. Allow me to not so much criticize as play kind of armchair writer with how I would have played that out.
Sure.
Instead of just having it being something that's kind of played out like fighter has anger issues. Instead, you make it a case where he just had one bad moment. And that moment was, yes, he killed somebody. And yes, the punches went on too long. But the fact is, he's kind of second guessing himself for the rest of his life with whether or not he was responsible or something that could have been done differently, because he doesn't know, okay, if the ref would have waved it off sooner, would this actually have killed him? Or, was he already dead the moment he hit the canvas and the canvas and he was out. Something. Okay, best way to describe it just came to me. Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, or Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy. The way that whole thing plays out is Peter is tortured because Goblin drops her off the bridge. He webs her. They get to the ground. Her neck's broken, and his doubt becomes: was she already dead when he threw her off, or was it the whiplash of my web stopping us that caused her neck to snap? You give Dalton a moment like that, where it maybe adds an unexpected layer of depth, of kind of blurring the line of being willing to use violence when it's necessary and it's an absolute last resort. And it might have even given it a little bit more of a kindred spirit with the original than this one has on just the superficial levels.
Yep.
So that's kind of my thought. Otherwise, I really prefer the fights in the original Roadhouse. Some of the scenes in this one are good, but the actual fight depiction, I'm reminded of how Vince McMahon didn't want anything to do with the wrestler because he felt like it might depict the business in a really dark, negative light, and that would be what people would associate with it.
That's really funny given what's happened with Vince McMahon as of late.
Yeah, exactly. But in this case, there's almost a kind of admittedly darkly cynical argument, and not one that I would agree with, that you might almost say that from a business perspective, WWE made the right decision in terms of how they were depicted in movies, and or how wrestling was depicted, than the UFC made about how now their first time officially being involved in a movie is going to be involved depicting basically what John McCain probably pictured every time someone brought MMA up.
Yeah. Okay, so some filmcraft elements about this movie. The plot, I can't imagine a plot having less stakes than the original, but somehow this one does. Because at least in the first one, the mob had this town under its thumb. Here, essentially the story is, well, you know, the old money runs the town, but if the fact that he didn't want to knock down the bar so that he could build a resort, which, you know, would have brought jobs in and, you know, freshened up the area, but, you know, never mind all that. We must keep the culture. I get it. But the only person that has a vested interest in that is the bar owner. Nobody else really gives a shit. Maybe some of the people that work there, but that's it. So now I struggle with being invested in the story when I don't think anyone else in this movie cares about the story either. Everyone in this movie is terrible, with the possible exception of Mo. Okay? These are all bad people. And high on that list of bad people.
Oh, come on. Bookstore Kid wasn't that bad.
Maybe Bookstore Kid. But what I'm saying is, like, in the first one, I mean, the guy just wants, I don't want to do too many comparisons. So never mind. I'll get back to it later. But what I'm talking about here is, like, Jake Gyllenhaal really puts a hurting on some of these people, and she's like, yeah, kill him. Like, she doesn't care. Like, there's no air of humanity in this movie. Everybody seems to be on the same page. Life means nothing. Hurting people is good. And it makes somebody like me who's watching this looking for decency in characters, something to root for, find it lacking, find it wanting. Like, I'm not rooting for Jake Gyllenhaal in this movie. I'm not rooting for the bar owner in this movie. And those are your two lead hero characters. That's bad writing when you've convinced me, who is looking for a hero in this movie, that there is none. And all I have left is how funny Conor McGregor is, which I just
realized you would probably get more hope and wholesomeness out of a combination of Has Been Hotel and Renfield.
I loved Renfield.
I wanted to watch Renfield.
Renfield's great. So as a point of comparison to Sean's point, like, you're with the kid, I think Nicholas Hoult. You're with Nicholas Hoult. Like, he is absolutely, it's almost to the point where it's a weird comparison. Like, Nicholas Hoult absolutely doesn't want to hurt people. And when he's, like, forced to, it's literally, it's like that, or, you know, he'll die. But he and I love his arc. I wasn't on that review because I was out with Melissa that night, but I remember thinking to myself, like, this is a really nicely told story, and his arc is wonderful. You know, and him finding himself, him finding the courage to stand up to the bully that is Dracula, all of that stuff. And plus, it's a hilarious movie. Here, I'm not really rooting for Jake Gyllenhaal. This is a real failure of writing, where there's nothing about him that I go, well, I hope you overcome your trauma, other than like my own human decency. Like, I don't want people to suffer. And the movie shouldn't be overly reliant on that, given the way people are now. Like, you're counting on people to have human decency and to empathize with him. And have you lived in this world very long? Because I wouldn't be too sure. So there's that.
There's nobody in the movie who connects him to who he was before the trauma.
Yeah.
There's no Jeff Healy character. There's no Sam Elliott character.
Yeah.
Because those people kind of connect you back to that earlier version of him,
right?
And kind of give you that grounding. And I think that was something that I think this movie missed. I think the other thing this movie missed, and they had the golden opportunity, was, you know what? God damn it. Make the bar owner's uncle Keith David and get him some work.
The last thing I'm going to say is, and I brought this up before with the plot synopsis, but I'm going to expand on it now. The fact, you know, with the first one, they just want, you know, protection money from everywhere, and it's, you know, they're taxing the people more and more and more. This is Robin Hood. You know, and in fact, Dalton is Robin Hood, you know, and the mob boss is King Richard, and the sheriff of Nottingham. Here, you don't really have that level of stakes. It's, you know, they want the bar so they can build the thing. And it's like, I said it before, they could have just burnt the bar down. But there was nothing stopping them from just taking this bar. I don't understand. You know, it's like when the movie can't figure out how to more smoothly and more directly get to the point where we need Jake Gyllenhaal in there, then I'm not really invested in your story. I'm not buying what's happening here. So the writing is bad. The characterizations are bad. The acting's fine. Everyone's, I mean, again, for what they're being asked to do is rather broad action stuff, very, very broad modern characters, which, just as an aside, I don't love modern characterization in movies. I think they're sorely lacking, and this movie is chock full of them. So I don't really blame the actors for that. They're doing the job they were given. And I think everyone gives a serviceable performance. Besides Conor McGregor, who is the best actor ever, because he's not acting. The one nice thing I will say, and you guys have talked about it, here's my take, and this is what got me and Robert nearly in a fist fight on Frozen Empire. I like the action sequences. I'm again one of these people who taking it for the child's point of view of it's pretty. Where the practical fight choreography in Roadhouse is nice, and I certainly give it credit that's due. I like the CGI and camera work of the fights in the modern Roadhouse. I like the wide angle framing of the fights to where you take a step back and you can see them in both characters in full frame. Like I mentioned this to Robert, and he was just like, "Oh, a tight shot of Jake Gyllenhaal. He's got someone in a rear naked choke." Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when they pull the camera back. Ridiculous. They pull the camera back, and Jake and whoever he's fighting are face to face, and they're doing stuff, and it's almost like, you know, Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, that kind of a thing. And it's clearly CGI, but it looked really cool to me. The more they did stuff like that, the more engaged I was in the movie. So that's like the one thing I can say that's like really positive about it, is it's an effective use of modern technology to freshen up something from the original, and I think it made it look cool. That's an objective. That's a subjective opinion. If you disagree, that's fine. This comes down to preference. And then lastly, the setting is so much nicer in the new one than the old one. I said it before. This is a dusty side of the road, you know, Midwestern honky tonk, as opposed to the gorgeous, wonderful blue skies, blue water, sandy beaches of Key West that is right down here in sunny Florida. Just a plane ride away from wherever you are. You can come into Orlando and take the 7-hour drive to get there. It's fantastic. Bring your families. Please sponsor us. Anyway, So if we don't have anything else about the movie,
Oh no, I want to talk fight choreo.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna be fast and furious on this one.
Yeah.
So I think so. Whenever we talk about fight scenes, I think there's two things we talk about. One is fight choreography, which is the actual physical movements between two people, and then what I like to call fight cinematography, which is how it actually gets presented on film. I think a lot of the fight choreography is good on this. I think the problem is that, and the weird thing is that some of the techniques they've used in this movie have been used in other ones. Like I think actually the one I think of is like the Kingsman movie uses some of the similar tricks.
Yeah.
But there are so many quick cuts. There's so much shaky cam. There's so much changing of frame, and there's so much kind of CGI'd in impacts that it enters, to use the VFX term, it enters the uncanny valley way too much. Where my brain is just saying there's something not right about this, and it just doesn't work. And it's, again, and I go back to comparing to Doug Liman's earlier work, where even it's that difference between like the Doug Liman first Bourne movie versus the Paul Greengrass later two Bourne movies, where the shaky cam gets way too out of control and you start losing what they're actually able to do.
Sure.
And it just, I think there becomes a translation issue. I think the problem is that some of the tricks they were using, like they were going kind of first person and going into these neat tunnel visions where you have like people graying out and effects in the camera. I think that's good for punctuation, but I think there's punctuation all over the place.
Okay.
The other thing I'll probably say, and this goes back to my whole comment around rhythm, timing, tempo, that sort of thing. During that last fight scene, you know, they kind of show when they start to grab like the shards of wood and stabbing each other, they started to play kind of the chords of Enter Sandman that he walked out to. The problem is they started playing that right before the fight ended.
Right.
Like, play that earlier.
Yeah.
You have that musical cue for that kind of that momentum shift towards Gyllenhaal, and then work off of that from like a tempo point. Is that, I mean, that's an editing issue and a sound issue of anything, but it's like I just found there was way too much kind of staccato in this. There wasn't enough variance and tempo and things like that. And again, the CGI stuff threw me. I actually thought, and I know that was something that Robert reacted to strongly, was like the whole slap fight at the beginning, which in concept I thought was actually really cool. But again, them adding in, taking away frames, doing some digital manipulation, you just knew it wasn't quite right. And your brain just didn't accept it. It's like looking at the face of somebody in the Polar Express.
All right. So we're almost at 2 hours here, and we still have plugs, and plugs always take an hour long. So I just want to do some really quick comparisons, and then I'll shoot to Sean, and then Andrew, you can take us home, baby doll. Again, I want to talk. I keep touching on it, and I'm like, no, I want to wait. Well, I'm going to deal with this. The plot of the first one is so much better than the plot of the new one. These feel like real people in a real town under the thumb of a real mob, and that he is here and he is not trying to get involved in this bigger thing, but they keep pushing him. And so there's a natural progression throughout the movie to where it ends and it builds towards a natural climax. This movie doesn't have that. It's a lot of the same sort of circular beat in the sense of they want to put pressure on this bartender so that she'll just give up, and she doesn't want to give up, and she never does give up. Jake Gyllenhaal gives up before she does, and it's just like they keep failing at beating up Jake Gyllenhaal. That's it. That's the whole movie. This is 2 hours of them failing to beat up Jake Gyllenhaal, and the one time they do it, the one time Conor McGregor accomplishes this goal, he quits. And the only reason he comes back is because he finds out the bookstore burnt down, which is, again, somewhat similar, to when they burned down the auto body shop in the first one. But by that point, I don't care anymore. And that's a problem with this movie. I said it before.
Immediately escalate to murder.
Yeah, and then immediately escalate to murder. Doug Liman's all pissed off that this didn't get a theatrical exhibition. I started to say this earlier, and for those wondering why this is important to me, because we study theatrical exhibition, and we've been talking about the changes in the marketplace in terms of people not wanting to go to the movies to see things and just willing to watch them at home. There's nothing about this movie that's an event. Nothing. There's nothing about this movie that's a draw. This is the movie that only gets watched at home. The The fact that it's free with your Amazon prescription with your Amazon subscription is the reason it's doing as well as it is. It's recognizable, it's free, and it's on a service everybody has besides Netflix. If you change any of those variables, no one sees this fucking movie. Its existence, and I know usually not the one that beats the drum about this, but its existence is merely Amazon bought the MGM studio library and all the IP with it, so let's remake everything. We have to, there's a great, just as an aside, there's a great Midnight's Edge video that I posted in our chat today, and it was talking about how people who they're making these movies for don't want these movies. And I was like, bravo, well done. Somehow, some way, somehow Hollywood will figure that out and adjust, but probably well after it's too late. That's it. That's really the only like comparison between the two. I think when people corner me at work and make me give them an opinion about these movies, my opinion is watch the first one because there's nothing about the second one that's really worth your time and effort other than you've got 2 hours to kill and and the service is free, then sure. And I think for most people, they're not going to put this level of scrutiny into it, so they'll probably enjoy it maybe, but it's not as good as the first one. Sean?
Well, for one thing, first off, on a general basis, I would say that I loved the first one much more than I thought I would. I'm genuinely glad I finally got around to watching it. The second, the remake, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily sorry that I spent the time to watch it.
Yeah.
Because it still had its fun moments. It still had its charms that kind of sucked me in. But it was also about 15 to 20 minutes too long. And I also don't feel like I would have necessarily missed out on anything if I had never had to watch that.
No, again, it's not even a streaming event. We're like, oh my god, have you seen the new Izavizza? Like, no, I don't know if anyone's talking about it other than it exists.
Yeah,
I mean, compared to the old one.
The first one I saw it, enjoyed it, and was genuinely sorry that it took me so long to get around to it because I really appreciated it. This one, thanks. I guess it's like getting an extra basket of bread when you're out to eat. Yeah. Nice, but did it really make a meal? And the only other particular thing that I would point out is Doug Liman, Dougie, baby. Make this make sense because I need to make sure I have this straight in my head. You had on set Joaquin de Almeida, the cartel boss from Desperado, which this movie might as well be a retelling of. You have him on set, and you have him already playing a villain, but you decide to make the focal villain of this whole thing the leaked, unfinished alpha version of MJF. Talk me through your math because it ain't mathin'.
All right, Andrew, take me home, baby doll.
I will keep it brief. I think I might have said this already, but it's like the 2024 version of Roadhouse is the movie that everyone thinks the original Roadhouse actually is.
Yeah, that's really, you did say it before, and it's a pretty brilliant point. All right, well, folks, that is our comparison and contrast and review of Roadhouse 89 and Roadhouse 2024. This past week, myself and Ronnie Adams spent an hour or so talking Ghostbusters. I kept pointing people at our Long Road to Ruin because we didn't get to the video games in that hour because we were too busy talking about the movies and the cartoon and the fandom and the chapters of Ghostbuster people, that sort of thing, conventions, that sort of thing. So we just never got to the video games. But I said, hey, you know what? We would not have had a better conversation than the one Sean had about the Xbox version of Ghostbusters, which is based on the Ghostbusters 3 script. So just go there. And then the next day, myself, Alexis, and Robert talked Frozen Empire. We did a pretty decent review of that. Next week, we've got No Bananas, but we also have, I'll be on Source Material talking the second chapter of our 3-part Mask review at the Mask Return. And then in the evening time, myself, Robert, and presumably Jason Teasley will be talking Godzilla times Kong, the New Empire. And then on Tuesday, myself and Jason again will be talking It's Friday, motherfucker. Yes, the Friday trilogy featuring Ice Cube and Chris Tucker. And then on Thursday, Bloody Thursday, Sean and I will be once again talking cinema.
Cinema!
Cinema.
Cinema!
Oh yeah. Yes, we're going to be talking Waking Life, Run Lola Run, and Marriage Story. And I'm going to try to not watch Marriage Story and throw myself out a fucking window. So tune in to see if I make it to the end of that review. Andrew Graham, I hear you like to roll around with other men in your pajamas. Tell us all about it.
So you're not going to bring me on that one, Mark. I know you like going for that joke every time, but I'm not going to.
Lowest hanging fruit.
Yep. Okay, so I do train at Havoc Martial Arts here in Havoc and Esteem Martial Arts here in Calgary. Right now, they're still in the middle of the move, but definitely go find them on all of the major social media networks and everything like that. My instructor, Jay Cooper, also does a fantastic YouTube series with the Budo brothers called Reality Check. And in that actually has discussions of several interactions between bouncers and other people that have interesting outcomes. I'll put it to you that way. Finally, what I'll do is, because we were talking about the nature of action cinema.
Cinema!
I would thoroughly recommend a YouTuber named Rossatron. He hasn't done anything in a couple years, but he's got some really fantastic kind of 10, 15-minute videos on a number of major action franchises. He talks about the John Wick series. He talks about a lot of the historical ones. He has a fantastic video on Sean. I'll put it to you this way: My Shawshank, Heat. But he's a fantastic YouTuber. I think he's actually started to get into his own directing, so good for him. But his videos are fantastic, so thoroughly recommend those.
All right, Sean, show us what you pissed from.
Okay, well, you can see the links down there at the bottom. My primary socials where you can interact with me are Instagram and Threads, although I didn't have room to put Threads on there, where you can just find me at Comer Codex. Feel free to hit me up there anytime you would like. And lately, oh boy, have I been back on the horse with the streaming. I am back on Twitch regularly, actually. I've been on, I think I've streamed about probably 4 or 5 times over the last 4 days. Twitch.tv/Comer Codex. As a matter of fact, if you happen to be watching the stream right this minute, not long after we sign off, so I would say probably about, somewhere between 10:30 and 11, I am going to be going live because we have an early playtest for the new Season 10 here in Overwatch 2 Venture. I am dying to try them out, and I would like to showcase what they can do for everybody, and also maybe get a little bit of ranked practice myself. And if you happen to enjoy the streams, especially the Overwatch stuff, first off, wow, I kind of thought I was the only one. But number 2, on April, I believe, 16th it is, I am going to be on Twitch.tv/Spilo, Spilo. That is my current Overwatch coach. He is going to be reviewing some of my gameplay and my ongoing quest to eventually get into the top 1% of GM ranked players. So keep an eye out for that next month.
All right, folks, thank you for joining us here on Trial. Court is now in recess. I want to thank Andrew Graham for coming on the show. He'll be back sometime in the fall to do a Michael Mann triple feature with me. Sean will obviously be back next week and for many weeks after that. So once again, thank you for joining us here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. Be well, be safe, and behave.